Welcome everyone. How's it going? This is the Conscious Chicano. Welcome to my Conscious Chat number 12. It's it's titled Pseudoscience and Cults. Um, this is one topic I'd like to talk about because when it comes to the Chicano community, the conscious community in general, there's a lot of cults out here, and they fall into a lot of pseudoscience, and they believe a lot of pseudoscience. And pseudoscience, when it pertains to native people, as well as pseudoscience when it comes to Christianity. So a lot of these conscious brown and black groups out here, I would even call them cults at times, where they embrace a lot of pseudoscience, and they create their own beliefs in their own little groups out here, their little cult followings out here, and there's like a whole lot of them. I mean, I'll go down the line. So first, you got to understand what pseudoscience is. In the academic field, pseudoscience is basically it's false science. It's basically it's it's a subject that presents information that is not correct, that's not confirmable, and there's a lot of examples of this. When you watch like the History Channel, and you watch a program called Ancient Aliens, right? And then they start talking about cultures around the world, like the Egyptians, the Mayans, the Aztecs, cultures all around the world, and they start making up information and claiming, oh, aliens, established those civilizations, or gave the people knowledge to build, those civilizations. So all credit goes to the aliens, right? The ancient aliens. There's even stories of supposedly aliens who use alien technology to move stones and everything to build some of these temples and pyramids out here. So ancient aliens, an example of pseudoscience, and a lot of times these pseudoscience people out here, they present themselves as experts in the field when they're not, and they and sometimes they'll even make up information when there's certain gaps of knowledge. Certain times when you say you study an ancient culture, and there's just sometimes there's some unknowns there, and then they'll come in and start making up stories with those unknowns. And this is what archaeologists, anthropologists call pseudoscience. When you have information, you present information that is not confirmable. You start twisting the facts around, So it's important to learn about pseudoscience. And I actually early on started learning about pseudoscience. There's actually a magazine that it's an old school magazine. I'm not too sure if it's still around. It's called the Skeptics magazine. And they would actually analyze a lot of pseudoscience out here. And I don't always agree with their views because they dismiss spirituality and metaphysics. But there is, I do agree with them when it comes to like debunking pseudoscience of a lot of archaeology. That's a lot of cults and a lot of these ancient alien type people, even some conspiracy theories out here, and just a lot of different types of information. So, and I actually came across like some of the cults out here in Los Angeles. There's some cults that exist, especially in the Black conscious community. You have people like the Afrocentrics who believe in the Olmecs. They believe the Olmecs were originally African. And you had this guy named Ivan Van Sertima who wrote some books and claimed that the Olmecs were African. And so a lot of these Afrocentrics come up, they talk amongst each other in their own African conscious movements, their Black conscious movements, and they basically claim that the Olmecs were originally African, and that they're the mother culture, or they're the mother culture of all Mesoamerican native society, and that basically the Africans came over here, and they have different stories of how they came over here, but different stories on how they came to Mexico and taught. Either they built the civilization there or taught the natives civilization. And it's and so they take credit for all the indigenous civilization in Mesoamerica, and this is baseless. This is full of misinformation, twisted information. Matter of fact, Ivan Van Sertima has been debunked even by Mexican archaeologists as well. And I came across an article by several of them, anthropologists, archaeologists, and they wrote several papers exposing Ivan Van Sertima and his pseudoscience. But the problem is that you have, even though they've been debunked, Ivan Van Sertima has debunked them. My bad. Let me rephrase that. I'm getting distracted here. Ivan Van Sertima has been debunked, okay? Let me reverse that. Okay, there's some people coming by and making all this noise, but the Mexican archaeologists and other archaeologists have debunked Ivan Van Sertima and his books. Just let me set this, as concrete as possible. So when you read those papers, I actually even have a book written by them as well, and it's in the academic field of archaeology, anthropology. We all know that Ivan Van Sertima is, he just twists his information around, he makes stuff up, he even makes up dates, and then he's found to be inaccurate, and then he backtracks and goes and changes the dates. And there's a whole problem with that. But the problem is that the Afrocentrics want to claim all the indigenous civilization of Mexico, and basically it's kind of like an Afrocentric superiority. And this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to lay claim of Mexico and claim that, Mexico was originally black, right? And a lot of these Afrocentrics go even further, and they like to claim that the original peoples of the Americas were African and not native, like Native American, not native, right? And one theory is that they claim that the natives that came through the Bering Strait theory, through the Bering Strait, that they are not original to this land, that they're colonizers, that the original people were African people. And this is just false. This is just false information right here. And we all know in archaeology and anthropology, science, that, long time ago, there was people that came through Siberia and crossed through the Bering Strait and traveled throughout, North America, Mexico, all the way down to South America. And that's the evidence there. But they come out with all this pseudoscience, especially the Afrocentrics, and they want to lay claim to the Americas, the natives here. And it's just a lot of this is going on in the black Afrocentric communities. Another aspect is what they call the Moorish temple science. I come across this pseudoscience as well, and there's some. Here's a problem though. You got some Mexicans, some Chicanos out here. Some of them are into the native stuff. They start buying into the pseudoscience, and they don't learn about what pseudoscience is. They don't know what it is, right? False information presenting itself as science, as fact, historical fact. So the Moors, the black Moors, are even trying to claim that the original people were Moors here. This is what they're trying to claim. And all this, even this Afrocentric Moor stuff, has been debunked. And even amongst African ethno-historians, I was listening to one, and he even debunks the whole Moorish temple science nonsense. And basically, there was this one scholar, he was saying that North Africa was not really inhabited by any Africans. It was mostly inhabited by like Arabs, Berbers, Arabs, and they were Muslim, and they were actually enslaving the original Africans there in Africa and Islamicizing them, right? And the African slaves, Africans were servants of the Moors and the Berbers, right? And so the Moors were not native to the Americas. The Moors were native. They say the Moors were like in northern Africa. They were in the Iberian Peninsula. Spain and different parts of Europe as well. But prior to colonization, the Moors have never been in the Americas prior to colonization. Now, when the Europeans colonized the Americas, there was some Moors that came along, right? Some Spaniards. I would even make the case that there was Spaniards who were also, a long time ago, the Moors and the Berbers conquered Spain for 500 years, they say. and they also mixed with that culture, right? And then that's why you got some Arabic words in Spain. But the Moors were never in the Americas. They were never in until the Europeans colonized, and then after you see that, you see some that were, came to the Americas along with the Spaniards, and so that's why sometimes, even when you have certain Spanish cities out here or names, they do have Arabic type names out here. Like one of them is Alhambra, You'll be surprised. But the problem is we got to distinguish between the real Moors and the Afrocentric Moors. So the Afrocentric Moors twist a lot of real Moor history, and they try to lay claim that natives were originally Moors. And there was a native guy actually exposing the fraud of the Moorish temple science, and basically saying that the Moors are claiming to be from his tribe. And he said this is just a bunch of nonsense. The tribe, I think it's Delaware or something like that, and there's a place that they later was called Moorestown or something like that. And here's the trickery that the Afrocentric Moors used, is that just because the name of the city is that, they try to claim that the original natives were Moors, when in fact the tribes there were just called Delaware Moors in some sense, named after the town. That was after colonization, right? Originally, they never referred to themselves as that. They referred to them as their own tribes, right? But they were never originally Moors. They just named themselves after that because of the town was called Moorestown, and that's the only thing. They weren't Moors of northern Africa, right? Or the Iberian Peninsula, right? So you got to make a distinction between the real natives versus the real Moors of history and the Afrocentric Moors, who are basically wannabe Moors. And one of the criticisms of the Afrocentrics is they like to lay claim to a lot of things out here in the Americas. When, and what happens is, and this is coming from other Afrocentrics, they're saying, you guys want to claim everything. It's because you guys have a loss of identity. You're not taking pride in your African history and culture. You want to lay claim to everything else, And I actually used to talk to this ex-Black Panther, and he would tell me, he would criticize a lot of these Afrocentric movements, and he'd say, man, these guys, these Muslims, these Moors, these wannabe like Egyptians and all that, like. He was telling me that the Afrocentric Hotep people, don't realize that the Egyptians were even oppressing African tribes as well. He was criticizing the Nation of Islam. Islam was oppressing African tribes, and the Moors temple science is an offshoot of the Nation of Islam. And I'll get into the whole Nation of Islam as well, because I used to kind of be involved with them. I've read Elijah Muhammad's books and his book on the fall of America. I still have his books. And what turned me off about the Nation of Islam is a lot of their pseudoscience. They start coming up with all these weird theories of aliens and stuff like that, and they start going into this pseudoscience stuff. And what turned me off is when I was reading The Fall of America, and Elijah Muhammad was like repeating kind of like the Mormon stuff, where he was basically saying that natives were red-skinned because they were cursed. And, you know, after that I was like, okay. And then this whole Yaqub story was all fake and phony. So the Nation of Islam embraces a lot of pseudoscience. So I wasn't, okay. I was like, I right away like detected that, and I was like, oh, these guys are, I don't know, they're like a cult, you know. They do empower the black community in some way, but the only problem with them is that they teach them false information at times, especially when it comes to you know, native culture at times, the whole Afro-Olmec stuff and everything, and then their offshoots, the Moors trying to claim native here. And we got some Chicanos, and some of them are into the Mexica Yo. They start buying into this Nation of Islam and this Moor nonsense. And I see some of them out there that still buy into this, you know. And this is why I'm actually out here just debunking this stuff, you know. But we got cults, you know, like, you know, that I'm calling them pseudoscientific cults in some sense. You've got the Moors, you got the Nation of Islam, and you even have the Hebrew Israelites. And the Hebrew Israelites is another cult going on right now. And a lot of them, you have different camps, different factions, but they have what is called the 12th tribe chart. And they make up this chart, this whole chart, and they like to twist the Old Testament around and then claim that certain tribes of Israel are certain people around the world. And one of the ones I deal with is on that 12 tribe chart, is they claim Issachar, you know, from the Old Testament, are the Mexicans. And this right here is just taking the Bible out of context, taking the Old Testament out of context, and trying to apply it to places and to people that, you know, that have no connection to that, you know. And so and then you have different camps out here. So you got the Afro, I guess the ones that are just strictly black people that just believe in their chart, right? And then others are, okay, it's black, it's native, and you know, different non-white people that are part of this chart. So you got different people, different camps that either believe in the 12th tribe applies to only Africans, or you have other camps that say, well, it's Africans as well as other non-white people. And so I deal with kind of like the Mexican Hebrew Israelites, and you know, and they push a lot of this. They try to twist things around with the Old Testament, and they try to link it to Mesoamerican culture, the Mexicas, the Aztecs, and all that, when there's no connection whatsoever with the ancient Hebrews. And they even go as far as trying to say, oh, the native language is Hebrew, and they even go as far as saying that the original people in the Americas are not native, that they're ancient Hebrews. So it's even almost like the Afrocentrics who claim that the natives here, the original inhabitants of the Americas, were black. And the Hebrew Israelites come out and say something similar, that the original inhabitants here were Hebrews. And then, look at even the Moors are trying to say the original inhabitants here were the Moors. So we got a lot of this pseudoscience and these cults out here in the conscious community, and they're basically trying to erase native history and culture and identity here in the so-called Americas. Okay, so we have the Moors, the Nation of Islam, the Hebrew Israelites. Okay, we got these cults here, and it's not just only with the African the black conscious community, but it's also influenced the brown conscious communities too, especially the ones who are living around, like say in Los Angeles. I live out here in Los Angeles, and there's some brown communities that somehow they're somehow linked up with the black conscious community, and they get influenced by the Hebrew Israelites, or by the Nation of Islam, or by the Moors, with all this pseudoscience. They start believing in this nonsense. And so, but a lot of this pseudoscience started with European colonizers. So what happens is the Afrocentrics, as much as they don't like the white man and white supremacy, they regurgitate a lot of white supremacist pseudoscience, right? And so earlier histories of the Americas were not advanced in archaeology and anthropology or nothing like that. So when the colonizers first came, the Spaniards, the English, and different Europeans, they were trying to make sense of who the people that they just came across in the Americas, who they were, and they weren't really scientific at that time, and they were limited in their knowledge. So they started making up stories. Oh, these guys must be the ancient Hebrew Israelites, right? Or these guys might have been the ancient Romans, or ancient Greeks, or ancient Phoenicians, ancient Egyptians, right? Ancient Atlanteans. Oh, here's this whole Atlantis pseudoscience. We even see this whole Black Panther Wakanda stuff somehow connected to this pseudoscience stuff. Atlantis, I studied philosophy. Plato mentioned something about Atlantis, but he didn't pinpoint where exactly it was, and most scholars suggest that it was near Greece, around there. And but it's so vague, it can apply to anywhere and at any time, any place, right? But there's this whole pseudoscience that takes Plato's mention of Atlantis, and a lot of the Masons start promoting this kind of nonsense, and they believed in this stuff. And there's a guy named Manly P. Hall who wrote about the destiny of America. A lot of the secret societies that came to the Americas believed in pseudoscience, and they equated the Americas with Atlantis. Either it was Atlantis, or the people who inhabited the lands came from Atlantis. And this whole Atlantis stuff even is connected with white supremacy. And a lot of white supremacists believe in this Atlantis stuff. And and like whoever's like kind of like Atlantis was supposedly some land that supposedly the ancient races came from, supposedly, and we don't have no evidence of Atlantis. And they come up with all these stories about Atlantis. I'm not going to get into all of them, but basically Atlantis is just, it's a made-up story. It's not, there's no evidence of that. And a lot of Masons believed in this pseudoscience. And so the colonizers, when they came to the Americas, they started making up stories of who the natives here were. And even to this very day, you see, like, they even try to explain who built those temples found in Mexico, right? And they never wanted to give credit to the natives there. They had this racist view that the natives were inferior, they weren't intelligent, and there must have been somebody else who built these temples, right? So one of them is, you got these guys like Van Daniken, making up stories, it was ancient aliens that built these temples, right? And then they started coming out, other stories too, like, this must have been the ancient Greeks, or the ancient Romans, or the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Hebrews, the ancient Phoenicians, right? All these phony stories with no evidence of any connection with Mesoamerica. If you guys don't know what Mesoamerica is, it's like what's considered the areas of where the Mexica Aztecs were, the Olmecs, the Mayans, around the coastal areas where a lot of civilization was urbanized in some sense. There's big civilizations of natives culture around those areas. But so so they anything but indigenous, right? They wanted to give claim to those temples to anything but indigenous. And this is Eurocentrism or even white supremacy. And so the early European colonizers started making up stories like that. And then later on, cults were formed from this. And certain beliefs and everything. And to this very day, that a lot of Hebrew Israelites use these ignorant Europeans as sources of their information, their beliefs, to try to prove that the natives were Hebrew Israelites, when in fact it's just a bunch of pseudoscience written by early European colonizers. And then the Mormons jump on that bandwagon. It's another cult. They came out, and the Mormons have a bad history against natives. They committed genocide on natives, and they even made up racist stories about natives, that they were red-skinned because they were cursed. And they fabricated a lot of phony archaeology and everything. And so a lot of Hebrew Israelites depend on Mormon so-called scholarship, right? All this phony pseudoscience by the Mormons, right? And they just regurgitate a lot of the pseudoscience written by early European colonizers. And we have, to this very day, these cults right here, still existing. So it's not only the Afrocentric cults, but you even have brown cults, the Mexican Hebrew Israelites, right? And then you have these white cults, the Mormons, and and so we have a lot of this pseudoscience when it comes to native culture. is basically all these cults want to lay claim to native civilization and their achievements and never give credit to the original inhabitants of these lands, you know. And pseudoscience is not only pertaining to even natives here. It is also, a lot of these cults start using pseudoscience even with their presentation or their discussions about Christianity. And they start making stuff up and twisting things around about Christianity, the true history of it. And I found this out too when I studied the Mormons, when I studied the Hebrew Israelites, the Nation of Islam, even these conspiracy theorists and all that, and their phony Holy Blood, Holy Grail, Da Vinci Code, Zeitgeist, crucified saviors, all that phony nonsense. A lot of these sources are Masonic, and like I said, the Masons believe in a lot of pseudoscience. They make stuff up. I was actually listening to a former Mason who turned Christian, and he says a lot of the Masons believe in a lot of they believe in a lot of beliefs that were satanic, Luciferian, and regarded as false doctrine. So a lot of the Masons embrace the false doctrines out here, misinformation, false information, and to this very day they still preserve it in their belief systems. And so these and a lot of times I found out a lot of these cults are created by Masons. Just look at a lot of these cults, the Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses. I found out the Hebrew Israelites, especially the black Hebrew Israelites, it was started by Masons. The Nation of Islam is full of Masons. They got I see evidence of, them involved in Masonry. And so even the Moorish temples, so, and it even deals with even the Masonry of say, the Shriners. The Shriners with their hats and everything. You see them at parades and everything. They're all into Islamic mysticism and stuff like that, So we have a lot of these cults out here. And, a lot of people need to be careful with them. And they infiltrated a lot of society out here. A lot of popular, a lot of what's popular out here. Usually you'll find out a lot of pseudoscience, and it's Masonic. And this is what's happening out here. The whole New Age, a lot of the New Age movement is Masonic too when you actually look into it. A lot of cults, the whole Madame Blavatsky and all these people were a bunch of Luciferian Satanists. And you got a lot of these cults out here. And they try to infiltrate Christianity as well and create their own cults as well. For example, I like to talk about when it comes to cults, look at the whole Jim Jones incident, They say he was working for the government and they were doing some kind of experiment. I don't know, how true that is, but it's a possibility. But Jim Jones started a cult, and he was preaching a lot of this liberation and everything, and he led everybody to drink the Kool-Aid, right? The spiked Kool-Aid. You had cults like, what's it called? Heaven's Gate and the Solar Temples. You know, you had those guys, you know, a lot of them committed suicide. You have a lot of cults out here, you know. Scientology, they used to work. L. Ron Hubbard used to work with Aleister Crowley, who was a big-time Satanist. JPL, Jack Parsons. So yeah, there's a lot of them out here. And you just got to be aware that, have discernment. Don't fall for the deception, you know. The New Age, you know, how they twist, you know, information around. And yeah, you got a lot of this false information, pseudoscience, false doctrines, and just be aware of that. This is part of the problem out here. And definitely, so I think the whole problem is people believe in this pseudoscience and then they regurgitate it. They teach this and they influence people to believe in all this nonsense. And a lot of times, especially when it's pseudoscience applied to natives here, it's robbing our achievements, our identity, our accomplishments, and everybody else wants to lay claim to it, you know. Everybody else wants to lay claim to our achievements, our civilizations out here. And us brown people, indigenous people, we need to expose this and confront the lies of pseudoscience and these cults out here. And not only natives, even Christians out here. Christians need to confront a lot of the pseudoscience out here, a lot of the cults in some sense, expose them for their deception. And the brown and black community is full of deception when it comes to these cults and pseudoscience. And this is part of the problem out here. And so, you know, people need to learn about, you know, real facts and evidence, real history, real archaeology, real anthropology, real knowledge. And sometimes the pseudoscience is embraced by native elders. And so, like, at times they reject the whole Bering Strait theory, you know, some elders out here, because they have a belief that there's a polygenesis, right? That natives originated here in the Americas. So you have different beliefs. Some believe that everyone came from the Americas, right? Or some believe in a polygenesis, that people originated in different places. But the science shows that none of this is true and factual. The evidence shows that natives came across through the Bering Strait. And so sometimes native elders will say, no, we have our creation stories, and that we originated here and nowhere else. And I think that's just, that's not being honest. That's not being honest there. And I'm not trying to dismiss oral tradition, because oral epistemologies have good evidence of, you know, of history, you know, wisdom and everything. But I think any conscious native elder will say, okay, our origin stories say we came from a certain place, right? And that's just our particular people, right? But then we also came from other places as well, right? We just didn't pop out of a certain area and that's it, you know? We didn't come from nowhere else, right? And so I think this would be actually more reasonable to say, the native oral traditions are valid, but we also have to have a scientific bigger picture and say, okay, so far the science is saying that the earliest humans, they come, we all have a singular origin in some sense, and there's even they can trace with evidence how people traveled throughout the world over time, right? Archaeologists do this, anthropologists do this, geneticists do this. So there's tons of evidence that natives crossed the Bering Strait, and we can't be denying that. And I know there's a guy named Vine Deloria Jr. who I admire. He passed away years ago, native scholar, and he was trying to challenge the whole Bering Strait theory. And I agreed with a lot of his stuff, but I didn't agree with him on that issue. And so a lot of natives out here, Native Americans, they don't want to believe in the Bering Strait, when in fact there's evidence of natives here having genetic ties to the inhabitants of Siberia, Asians, having very much a lot of evidence connections with Siberia and stuff like that. So I know sometimes I even look at some Mexicans, and sometimes they look kind of Asian, and it's not because some Asians, there's some Asians that went to Mexico and mixed with some Mexicans, but there's some that Mexicans out here who don't have a connection with new people who arrived after colonization, because Asians did go to Mexico as well. There's even Filipinos and Chinese, but there's some Mexicans in certain areas who had no connection with Filipinos and Chinese, and they look very, as they call Mongoloid, right? Mongoloid features. And we can't base everything on features, but you could see that, present in some native cultures out here and some Mexicans out here, And sometimes they even confuse Mexicans with Filipinos at times. And sometimes I get confused too sometimes. Sometimes I think a Filipino, I think he's Mexican, and he's not. So there's definitely, I would definitely evidence that natives from Alaska to the tip of South America have, connections with Siberia and Asia, stuff like that. So you can't deny that whole Bering Strait theory right there, And so that's the problem with natives in some of their pseudoscience too. Some of the so-called Mexica elders out here started embracing this whole Atlantis stuff too. They make up stories. They even try to twist the Nahuatl words. Atlantis means At, right? At means water, Atlantis. And there's actually no real, At and Atlantis have no connection, in their languages. Originally, At was the Nahuatl wasn't even written in Latin script, right? And Atlantis is, definitely written in Latin script. So we gotta know the difference there. So there's no actually connection between in terms of language history with the word Atlantis and Ot. But here's the problem with some of these Hebrew Israelites and all these pseudoscience guys. They'll pick a certain word and then they'll pick another word from somewhere else and say, see, look at, they're similar. Look at, they're related. So one came from the other. That's not how you do it. This is not how you prove a lineage of a language and its connection. And the same goes with anthropology and archaeology. There's certain universals. I think I went over this one time. It's called the traitless comparison. So there's certain traits in every culture that's universal in some sense, right? Everybody went, everybody has some kind of, every culture has like a history of war, right? A history of peace, a history of being smart, right? Every nation just has certain traits that are basically universal to every culture. But when you say, okay, you pick a certain trait from one culture and then you find it in another culture, you say, oh, look at their direct lineage, right? One comes from the other. That's not how you do history. It's not how you do. This is not how you trace a certain history and culture and all that. Archaeologists, anthropologists don't do that. How you do it is like direct evidence, right? And you trace, whether something is connected. Some cultures connected to the other, and there's going to be tons of evidence of that. It's not going to be little universal traits, For example, we have the Afrocentrics. They like to look at the lips of the big lips of the Olmecs, right? Say, oh, look at the Olmecs are black. Look at the big lips. Big lips are universal, right? You find big lips amongst natives, amongst Asians, amongst Europeans. I mean, big lips are universal. So that's not a way to say that, to establish that the Olmecs are African, right? Or sometimes they'll come out and say, well, look, I look at the codices or some kind of inscription on the temples, and I see someone painted in black. That must be a black man. So this is the pseudoscientific nonsense there, right? When in fact, the natives would paint themselves black at times. They'd paint themselves blue, red, different colors. Doesn't mean that it's a certain ethnicity that from far away somewhere else. They're all indigenous, right? And that's the problem there. And then some of the Hebrew Israelites do that kind of stuff too. They see a passage in the Bible and it talks about certain traits about certain people, right? And then they go look for that trait in some natives, right? And they say, oh, look at this. These are the same people. It's just baseless, This is not how you establish, a connection or lineage or historical ties of one culture with the other. Some people have no clue of what proper, scientific evidence is, or, methodologies, or they don't know about archaeology, anthropology, none of that. And then some of them, they quote old, outdated, say publications or articles from early anthropologists and archaeologists who later, see, science changed, right? It evolves, right? As more evidence you find out, things start changing. Either early on, you're found to be, it's like your evidence was not too, to clear certain, and as time goes on, you find more and more and more evidence that actually debunks your early theories, right? And so, like I said, the early European colonizers, some of them were archaeologists, right? And they assumed certain things. They came out sometimes with false interpretations, false theories. But then later on, anthropology and archaeology evolved and started having better methodologies, better tools and technologies to understand cultures and histories. And so they abandon a lot of early theories as pseudoscience, and they take on a better, they have better research now with more evidence, right? And that's what science is. But people don't even understand that process right there. They just, they right away, people, especially people who are not, educated in that field, and they right away, early archaeologists said that they were the Hebrew Israelites, and so, I'm going to take that as absolute, and then evidence later found out that it was baseless, it may be even fabricated, Sometimes they would make up stories just to become famous and popular, or to sometimes to have they would sell certain artifacts, for a high price and make money off of that. So you got to be aware of that early history, right? Early anthropology and archaeology at times, and so you got to keep updated with the new research and new evidence. Before they were trying to say the Kinniwek man was a white man, and then they recently did a genetic studies and they found nope, he's a native man, right? So we got to be careful with all this stuff, We got a lot of pseudoscience and cults, and it's really popular, You find it on the History Channel, you see it in conspiracy theories out here, And the way I am is, I do believe some conspiracy theories are correct, as long as you have evidence. Actually, I wouldn't even say it's a conspiracy theory. I would say that, the evidence comes out and debunks the official narrative. But as long as you have that evidence, okay? Some people want to label it as a conspiracy theory. I wouldn't necessarily say that. A conspiracy theory is known as like something that is either there's no evidence for, and they make stuff up, or they make certain connections to something that are not really connected, right? But like I said, some conspiracy theories that came out to be true, but some of them have become shown to be false. So you have to be aware of that, So the way I am is I'm even critical of some of these detractors out here, some of these so-called conspiracy theorists out here, But I don't dismiss everything. The way I am is I'm reasonable. I'll look into it and see, okay, does this make sense or not? Let's check out the facts, right? Let's dig into the history. Let's dig into what they're saying, right? And the whole alien stuff, like, I don't dismiss everything about aliens either. The way I see it is that when you start, you see, there's pros and cons to this whole alien subject. The whole alien stuff is like, okay, when you start laying claims that aliens created all these civilizations, like you don't give credit to the natives or even the Egyptians, and you say, oh, all these ancient aliens are the ones that created all this stuff out here. I think that's pseudoscience, and it's just false information. But aliens, in the sense where people want to think they're aliens, I actually believe in the metaphysical, the spiritual, and I do believe that what they're calling aliens are actually demons, right? Fallen angels, right? Fallen angels that turned bad, right? Evil spirits. And so I do believe that they exist, and I do believe that evil spirits do exist due to evidence of people being possessed. Possession is real. It exists. I've actually studied, I've taken classes in anthropology of religion, and it's a real phenomenon that does exist. And so I do believe that a lot of what people are saying are aliens are actually demonic spirits, fallen angels, evil entities out here. But and that's as far as I go. It's like, okay, but to say that these so-called aliens created all these temples, I don't agree with that. But I will say there is evidence of, say, the Mayans, talking to serpent spirits, right? They believed they would even do certain rituals where they would get possessed. I was reading a Mexican archaeologist talking about this. This is what actually they believed in. They would do certain rituals and they would talk to these serpent deities, right? These serpent spirits. And so I do believe the spiritual realm is real, and there's evidence of that. But to say that, maybe some of these temples were influenced by these deities, these demons, right? These fallen angels, right? These evil spirits. And it would make sense that, okay, they wanted temples built for them and for humans to be sacrificed or offered to them, right? We have evidence of that in Mesoamerica. You had the temple of Quetzalcoatl, right? Or you had human sacrifice or offerings to Tlaloc or Tezcatlipoca, different deities amongst the Mexicas and even amongst the Mayans as well. So maybe these evil spirits, these serpent deities, influenced them to create these temples to make offerings to them, And so, but the natives did use their manpower to create these temples, right? It wasn't some kind of alien technology and all that. So, but yeah, it's just this whole topic is very interesting. It gets pretty deep, and I just have an issue with a lot of these pseudoscientific cults out here. They lay claim. They dismiss indigenous achievements, civilization. They don't want to give credit to the natives. They want to give credit to everything else but natives, right? And also when it comes to Christianity, they want to push their pseudoscience on Christianity and try to dismiss it, right? They're conspiracy theorists, this whole holy blood, holy grail, zeitgeist, Da Vinci Code, all this nonsense, crucified saviors, all that nonsense, right? A lot of pseudoscience. So we have to question it, we have to debunk it, you know, and be careful out there, because you'll be deceived. A lot of people are deceived with this misinformation, a lot of this pseudoscience. People think it's actually facts, historical facts. People think it's actually science and all that, but it's not true. It's just false information presenting itself as evidence, or it's even twisting the facts around, you know. So some of these pseudoscientific people will acknowledge the facts, but then they'll misinterpret it, they'll twist it around, you know. And I actually gotten in debates with some of these Afrocentrics out here in Los Angeles. You know, I came across one who was a Hotep guy, Afrocentric Hotep, the guys that believe in the Black Egyptian stuff, and he was trying to promote that the Olmecs were African. And I debated him, and I said, man, where's the evidence that you have that there? And he starts quoting Ivan Van Sertima. I'm like, oh man, Ivan Van Sertima has been debunked. I mean, that's not good evidence, you know. And then he comes, oh, what about Clyde Winters and all this? And Clyde Winters too. He's another phony. so it's like that's why you brown people gotta equip yourself with real evidence, real knowledge, real history, real archaeology, real anthropology, because they'll come off with their pseudoscience. They'll come off and try to persuade you. I had Hebrew Israelites coming around and trying to tell me, they're trying to tell me, the natives are Hebrews, right? And there's no evidence of that. And they try to twist things around about native culture. Look, that's Hebrew, that's Hebrew. No, it's not. It's not Hebrew. It's native, it's indigenous. I seen some Afrocentrics trying to do that with me, you know? And it's the same thing, right? You know, so it's not just the Afrocentrics, but it's also the Eurocentrics too. They come with their Mormonism, right? They try to tell you, the original natives are the ancient Hebrews and all that. Same nonsense, right? And sometimes you got brown folks believing this pseudoscience, regurgitating this stuff. There was a so-called Mayan elder, Humboldt's men. He pushes a lot of New Age nonsense too. I read his book, and I heard him talk. He pushes sometimes Masonry in a lot of their pseudoscience. He pushes this, some of these other native elders out here, so-called Mexica elders, and even other native elders. They embrace this whole New Age, pseudoscience, Atlantis pseudoscience. So we got to be critical. We got to be critical of Eurocentrics, Afrocentrics, and even our own brown natives and our own brown people were pushing this pseudoscience and all this, fake information. Got to be critical about that. Be well versed, Just be aware of that. Anyways, I know amongst us native communities, there's a term called wobble. I don't like talking about this too much because I'm here on YouTube, right? And I know there was a community of natives exposing the wobbles, right? And they got banned, they got, censored. And basically, wobble is a term called wannabe aboriginal, right? And what it means is that there's always people trying to claim that they're native to the so-called Americas, and trying to erase the original inhabitants' identity and history and culture, and they want to lay claim to it. So we have, European colonizers doing that. We have Africans doing that. So, and other people trying to do the same thing, So it's important for us brown natives out here to definitely resist this and expose it, and expose it for its lies, its pseudoscience, and its deception, And you'll be surprised how much the pseudoscience has spread, and it's crazy, But us brown people need to be well aware of this and equip ourselves with that, with knowledge, and expose it. But anyways, if anyone, I think I'm going to end it here. If anybody here, if somebody's on I see some people on Instagram, anyway here on YouTube, want to send me a question, just write down a question and I'll be willing to answer. And it has to be on the topic of pseudoscience and cults out here. So if you just came in, I was talking about the pseudoscience and cults pertaining to native culture, Mexican, Chicano culture, and even Christianity as well. Because there's a lot of pseudoscience about Christianity out here that people believe in. Like I said, the whole Holy Blood, Holy Grail, the Da Vinci Code, Zeitgeist, the crucified saviors, all this nonsense about Christianity has been it has spread, and a lot of these cults out there believe in this nonsense, right? Coming from the Masons. The Masons believe a lot of pseudoscience as well. This whole Atlantis stuff, the fake lineage of Jesus supposedly having children, and supposedly the European aristocracies coming from the lineage of Jesus. That's all fabricated, phony pseudoscience. There's no evidence of that. A lot of the Masons believe in that nonsense. And even the cults out here, when it comes to the natives out here, got a lot of Afrocentrics, early Eurocentrics, Hebrew Israelites, Nation of Islam, the Moors, the Mormons. A lot of these cults out here like to present misinformation about our culture and twist the facts around. And they deceive our people. They deceive the masses to believe all that. It's even all the way in the whole conspiracy communities too. And so it got as far as to even the History Channel with all these ancient alien and Von Daniken pseudoscience and all that, and trying to erase native history and culture, trying to give credit to everybody else but natives, which is white supremacy, which is Eurocentrism. Anyways, I just wanted to leave it as that. I guess nobody's asking questions, so I'll be ending this. Definitely, if you want to contact me, send me a message on Instagram, the Conscious Chicano. Also, find me on Rumble. Look up the Conscious Chicano, and I go deeper into a lot of uncensored information. Because these major platforms like YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and all that, they ban you and censor you, right? So you can't get too deep, right? So you can find me on Rumble and also Twitter. Look me up, the Conscious Chicano, or Conscious Chikano with an X. And you can also go on my YouTube below and click on my links and, you know, check out the information that I retweet on Twitter, or sometimes I comment on there. Just exposing a lot of stuff out here. But I can't do that on YouTube. I can't do that on TikTok, and definitely not Facebook. But anyways, I'm gonna let you guys go. You guys have a good day. Don't be woke.